We are on Club Wealth TV today with our guest, Matt Cavanaugh. For those of you that have seen Club Wealth already in the past, or I should say Club Wealth TV in the past, you know my co-hostess with the mostest, Cherie Benjamin. Cherie is a baller from Atlanta, Georgia. And Cherie is doing, what are you going to do this year? How many transactions are you guys going to close this year, Cherie?
I said as many as you want me to, Michael. Just give
Oh
me
my gosh. But realistically, I mean,
so you might as well just let him.
Just
say
let
that again. Just let him.
You're gonna make it up anyway, so
Michael will he'll throw some numbers out there. So I'm like, okay, sounds good.
Oh my gosh, whatever. Whatever. So a lot over what? 300, 400? What are you gonna close this year?
Yeah, that's a nice little over number. I won't go under.
Okay, so you'll be over 400. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I won't go under.
Well, that's good. Well, and so bottom line, you're going to close some deals. And then Brian Curtis, you're in Bentonville, Arkansas, and you do well over 300 of the 400 transactions that community has each year.
410, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So the bottom line is these guys are both ballers. You guys already know these guys. If you don't, then something's wrong. You got to get to know them. These guys are freaking awesome. And so the truth of the matter is they do a ton of transactions. They've built massive teams. And they didn't start there 3 years ago. Cherie, what was it 3 years ago? You were at 45 transactions was your best year or something like that?
That would have been nice. 35.
35. Just 3 years ago, she was at like 35 transactions a year, and now she's like almost 400-ish, whatever. So bottom line, it's doable. And so we've got with us today our guest, Matt Cavanaugh. Matt's going to be sharing with us some Jedi mind tricks that he uses to close. I think you said you were going to do about 130 transactions this year in California there, right? In Turlock?
Yeah.
All right. So in Turlock, where is Turlock? That's not...
Yeah, Turlock is halfway between Sacramento and Fresno. So it's about an hour and a half south of Sacramento and about an hour and a half north of Fresno.
Halfway between Sacramento and Fresno. Isn't that just farms?
It's farms. It's rural. Very rural. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. All right. I know about where you're talking about. All right. Well, that's cool. Well, so before we get started, you guys, I want to remind you of our sponsor. Our sponsor is WiseHire. Brian, Cherie, and I use WiseHire on our teams, and a lot of Club Wealth members use these guys to help with recruiting both agents and administrative staff. If you guys haven't checked them out already, go to clubwealth.com/WIZEHIRE. That's clubwealth.com/WiseHire with a Z. And they're awesome, man. It's very affordable. They do a great job. They provide us lots of candidates. Tara says she's getting she's running 3 ads right now, and she's getting between 5 and 10 applicants per ad per day right now. So they do a really good job of helping us ramp up our talent pool. All right, that being said, Matt, what are we talking about today? What are these Jedi mind tricks that you're going to be teaching us today?
Yeah, so basically growing up, I was involved in the ministry. So we were always taking these personality assessments in order to better understand the people in our world. And so one of those that really had stuck out to me, from a younger age was the Enneagram. And it gives us insane depth of knowledge as to why people make the decisions that they do. I know the main tool right now in real estate is the DISC test, and that has some pretty good insights into people, but I believe the Enneagram can go infinitely deeper if you kind of go into it in terms of actually understanding a lot of the personality habits people have formed over their life. And so because I spent so much time on it, now I can usually identify people pretty fast. And it just gives me a lot of insight into, what to do with them, what not to do with them on a sales side. And then as we're starting to build our team, what type of people we're wanting to take on and how to treat them in order to get them more successful. So.
Okay. So let's go ahead on and break down this Enneagram.
Yes. Yes.
Say it right. Maybe I should say it right first.
Yeah. It's a hard word to say.
Give it to us one more time and then just break down what it actually is, because you're right. A lot of us know and we understand a disc, but break this down for us so that we have a little bit of a baseline for it.
Okay. So the Enneagram it's ENNEAGRAM. And so what it is, it's basically a 9 personality type study. And it's based on the concept that your greatest strength is oftentimes kind of propelled closely by one of your greatest weaknesses. It's essentially where you place your focus and your motivation in life. And so some people are more focused on being, say, perfectionist. Other people are focused on more just achievement in general, et cetera. And so there are certain strengths and natural weaknesses that come along, with that personality. And just understanding that really helps understand the main drives that people have.
Okay, so hold on. I got to back you up for just a second. First of all, everybody watching right now, would you do me a favor? If you're using the DISC profile in your business right now, could you just type DISC in the chat there, in the Facebook chat? I want to get a feel for how many people that are watching right now are actually even using the DISC profile. And then, I am too, right? And what's crazy to me is DISC profile, you got really 4 kind of key, and I guess it's more than 4 personality types, right? Because you've got the mix of all the different ones, but the reality is you've got 4 kind of key things you got to keep in mind. Is this Enneagram, you're talking about 9. Man, I'm telling you, most people struggle with 4. So is this going to get uber complicated? How easy is this to use? And is it really a big difference between that and the DISC? And is it an either or thing, or do you use both?
I use both.
Okay.
So, yeah. So absolutely. So DISC is good in the sense that it really is a fast way of understanding temperament, right? Is somebody a driver? Is somebody more people-oriented, or are they more analytical, right? And so whereas like the Enneagram, like as an example, like let's say I'm on a sales or listing presentation, right? If I know that somebody is a 5, I know that their main mode of operation is based on a desire of mastery and information. So for example, I know that the way that they'll feel pressure on a sales call is completely different than another number, right? So for example, I know that I can literally not even attempt to close or be a very light closing with a 5, and they'll literally then want to sign with me or immediately call me after the appointment to want to sign, assuming I did a good job presenting the information. Whereas other numbers are extremely like desirous of me pressuring them into making a decision. So like, a lot of times I hear people like, on our team or just in other places are like, hey, where should I put a lot of pressure on somebody when I'm closing, or should I not? I think it depends on who that person is and, how much acceptable pressure they have in the sales process and, other factors. So,
okay,
so real quick, are you asking your clients to fill this out?
No. So this is something that I'm just intuitively reading on them as I go.
Okay, that makes sense.
So how quickly can you assess that? I mean, okay, so is this on a phone call? Can you assess it on a phone call without asking them a bunch of crazy questions? Or, how do you dial that in quickly so that you can properly close this person?
Yeah, it's a little bit tougher on a phone call. So the first thing I do on a phone call is I kind of break the 9 into 3 to start, right? And so I think people like learning this, it might be better to start with 3 than the full 9, right? So basically you have typically people that are more extrovert or aggressive, right? Then you have people that are analytical, and then you have people that are what we call compliant, right? Or, they're more people oriented, right? So it's kind of in that way similar to the DISC, but then within each of those, there's 3 subtypes of those, right? So on the phone, I'm not necessarily trying to figure out, are they a 4 or are they a 9, right? I'm just trying to figure out where is their main focus, right? Is it on people? Is it on data? Or is it on, is it more extroverted in that way on accomplishing something? So then when I get there, then oftentimes I can tell from there pretty quickly which one of those it is, and then go from there.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So I think for most of us, I think it's pretty easy to tell. Is somebody a driver? Are they, a little bit more introverted? Are they more of a people pleaser, or are they more of an analytic? And so that said, once you know that, how do you close differently on those 3? And let me back up. Do you have a quick test that you use to determine which people fall into?
I'll typically ask certain questions. So let's talk about the extroverted.
Tell me exactly.
Yeah. So for example, like most real estate agents are going to be extroverted. Not all of them, but the majority, right? So the extroverted types on the Enneagrams are going to be your 3s, your 7s, and your 8s. So for example, 3s on the Enneagram, they're motivated by achievement and being the star, right? So being the best at something, being seen out there, they want to be exposed to the world in a positive light. Whereas like 8s are far more about conquering and accomplishing, and they're far more willing to be behind the scenes. They're more of your empire builders, right? And they don't really need the glory as much as, say, like example, a 3 would, right? So 8s, which is what I am, are really they're truth seekers on a deep level, right? They don't care if the truth is negative, they just want the truth. right? So when I know I'm on a listing presentation with an 8, I know that I can be very blunt, very direct, because most of our business comes from expireds and FSBOs. So we have to tell them some pretty hard truths. And so when I get a sense of, okay, I'm dealing with an 8, I'm just going to be really blunt. And the more that I challenge them, the more that they actually feel my strength and want to do business with me, right? Whereas with the 3, I have to tend to show a little bit more caution and make sure I'm giving more praise to that person, because the more praise they feel, the more they puff up and the more they want to do business.
Okay, so this is what I got to know. I mean, I'm just dying to know this because, I mean, I love where you're going with all this. What I would love to see is, okay, if I've got a chart that says, okay, here's the you said there's 9 of them, right?
Yep.
Here's the 9 Enneagram. Am I saying that right? Enneagrams?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the 9 Enneagram personality types. And with each one, this is how you close them. Do that. And I know we've got a download for you coming up later, but is that what the download is, or is it something different?
It might have some elements of that. If not, I can send you a larger download that has that.
Man, I would love that. I would add that to the download, and I'll take a look at that. I mean, I'm very interested in this. So if I'm on the phone with somebody, can you just give us the quickest version of, hey, this is how you're going to identify which of these 9 things this person is?
Yeah. So a lot of it is based on like where they place their focus, right? So like, for example, 6s are super nervous people, right? They filter their world through fear. So a lot of times you'll have those people on your team where it's always worst case scenario. So a lot of the times it's what you're experiencing that is telling me, right? So I'll ask a lot of times the same questions, like where do you want to go? How soon do you want to be there? What's the thing that you don't want to happen? What do you absolutely want to happen, right? So the questions aren't super different from how you would normally qualify a prospect. It's just how they're answering them that tells you so much about who they are, right? And the thing that I love about learning this is not just to close more real estate sales. Like I find probably more value in how I run and lead my team than it really helps with closing too. But like understanding team motivation is really helpful. Like, for example, like a lot of times when you're hiring team members, you want team players that are going to also have a chance at succeeding, right? But there's a lot of variety in there. Some people that are more motivated by peace, others are more motivated by helping. So, so I would say it's not necessarily exactly in the questions that you ask, although there can be some questions you do want to ask, but it's more in like the listening aspect of how are they communicating to you.
Okay, that's really interesting. So the downside to that is it sounds more complicated than just I can just ask a question and all of a sudden I'm going to know this person's a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. So tell me what can we take away right now? Give us a nugget. Give us something that we can implement right now in our businesses that we can use this for success.
Okay, first thing, I think there's 2 universal principles, because what I did is once I like started going deep on the system, I interviewed like 10 people that were each number, some in real estate, some not, and like asked the same series of questions to them to figure out how they answered them. So what I found was the 2 principles that will work for anybody in sales at any time is confidence and authenticity. So regardless of the number, if you present confidently and you present yourself authentically, then you're going to win with those people, regardless of their Enneagram type. Other than that, like there might be other things that are universal, but those are the 2 that I found to be true. And then, beyond that, I think just, take the test and start studying. Like the reason I'm so passionate about this topic is, so I was in a hotel room, I was going to a real estate event, and my marketing guy gave me the test. I took it, and the result was my biography. I had never read something more true about myself in my life. So then I gave it to my brother, and he came out with his result, and same thing for him. So, it hasn't been like 100% of people feel that way, but probably 80 or 90. So for me, it's just something that I've just allowed to come into my life, and it's totally shifted how I think even about myself. So for me, it's just been a great thing in terms of trying to help myself be more productive, understanding what my natural weaknesses are. And
interesting. All right, Brian Shree, help me out here. I'm trying. I want to get this. I want to pull this out of Matt. I really want to understand. I want to give our viewers something they can take from this and implement right now.
So hearing Matt say, and I think this is an important part. Step one, if I was going to use this in my business, and who knows, maybe I will, is I need to go take a test for myself. I need to get an idea of where I fall on this. Am I a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Then I need to take and probably spend some time understanding what that means. Okay, I'm a 3 or whatever, and understand what that means. And then I need to have some, in my opinion, some sort of simplistic way of breaking it down. I can't, just having a conversation go, oh, that guy's a 3.825, and I don't know if it's nice or not. But
Right.
I would probably, and here's what Michael was trying to get you to do, and if you don't do it, that's fine. He was trying to say, okay, are you a numbers guy? Okay, you're a high C. Oh, do you like to be in charge of everything in your life? Okay, you're a high D. And I'm oversimplifying it, but I think that was what Michael's trying to say is, how do we as agents during a conversation determine someone's a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9? And are there specific questions that we can almost simplistically say, oh, if they answer it this way, then they're clearly this? And my guess is it's probably never going to be that simple. And honestly, if it is that simple, it's probably not that good. So, that's kind of what we're trying to figure out, because I'll be honest, I don't know this system and I don't know how to use it. I love the concept. Here's the thing I love the most about it. To answer the question of what number somebody is, you have to pay attention. And so, for example, we teach VAC, and I don't know if you guys know VAC, but visual, auditory, kinesthetic. That's basically 3 ways people learn. And one of the things I had agents do for a long time is, hey, when you go into a presentation, listed presentation, buyer terms, whatever it is, when you walk out of there, I want to know where they are. They're visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Let's just assume for the sake of this conversation, they got it wrong. I don't really care, because at least they were paying attention. And I'm guessing that there's a lot of that going on with you, because I don't know how many people you have on your team, Matt, but I'm going out on a limb and say some of them are really good at it, and then there's some other people.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think for starter point, I would make sure that when people ask, especially when they ask the question, what's most important to you about how the process goes? When they're asking that question, oftentimes a person's going to answer, in terms of they want more stats or more detail, right? If you were to break those categories up, the 1, 5, and 6 will fall in those lines. So if someone answers, if they're more detail oriented, as we would think of like a D or a C on the disc, they're going to be a 1, 5, or 6. If they answer more results oriented, they're going to oftentimes be a 3, 7, or 8. And if they answer more people oriented or along those lines, they're going to be a 2, 4, or a 9. Right? So that's going to be an immediate question that you can ask, that you can drop it down to 3, and then within those, you could ask 1 or 2 more questions once you maybe know the description of each number to boil it down to that specific number. The real value is going to come when you understand the base description for each number. Then you're going to understand a lot of where the power is at in terms of how to influence that person.
Okay, so here's what I want to do. I don't want to just talk generally about it. Let's get into it. Let's talk about what are all 9 categories, and I'm typing these in as you talk. So give us each one at a time and tell us what we need to know about each one so that we can better understand this. Because I really want this to be deep, and I want people to understand this when they're done with this call.
Perfect. Okay, so 1 is the perfectionist. They also call the reformer. So the 1's main drive in life is to see that things are in order and that they're right. They don't have to make everything in the world right, but there typically is a certain area of focus that they're really, involved in. So oftentimes when you see a 1, you walk into their house is going to be perfect. It's going to be perfectly organized. Now, especially if it's female, sometimes more often than it's male, right? So when you're talking to a 1 in terms of like how to sell to them, they're wanting to make sure that you do the process right. So like when I'm selling to them, that's the words that I use. Like, you want to make sure that we do this accurately, correctly, and precisely. It's more important to them that you do it that way than any other way, because that's where their main focus is. So the 2s are the helpers. So they get their value in life by helping people. And
Hold on, 2 is the performers. Is that what you said?
2 is the helper.
I'm sorry, the helper. Okay.
Yep. So they basically, if there was a virtue for them, it would be love, right? So they're oftentimes the most kind, soft, gentle, loving people because they gain their value from helping others. And so in that number, like, being salesy is like, it's a problem, right? They don't want you to be salesy. They want you to be completely relational. Everything's about, like, they're going to be one of the most enjoyable people to present to at the listing table, because they just want to make sure that you're going to be comfortable and your needs are met. Right. And so if they view you as authentic, the game's already over. You've won. They actually don't even care if you show them any stats at all. Usually. I mean, as long as they halfway think you're competent, you're in good shape with a 2. So the 3s, you can slow me down or speed me up. Just let me know.
No, this is great. I'm typing this in as you go.
Okay. So the 3s are the achievers. So they're the ones that need their horn tooted the most. They're typically going to brag about themselves more than any other number, especially if they're less healthy as a person. And so they're usually very socially gifted, and they usually know how to work people over pretty good. Yeah, they're probably some of the most malleable people in terms of personality, but you're going to win with them in terms of just recognizing their strengths and making them into the hero. The fours are very emotional types, are very creative types. So like, I don't know if you've ever been in listing presentations where it seems like logic might be secondary to other things. Oftentimes you could be dealing with a four in that aspect where they value creativity and emotion far more as real than maybe a more like logical process. And that's obviously overstated, right? Obviously fours can be very logical, but oftentimes a four, kind of their main mode is to be creative and to take the flood of emotions that they feel in life and to make each one of those as real as possible. So oftentimes your actresses, your Hollywood celebrities, a lot of them would fall in the four category. And so with them, you know, I'll slip out of it. You know, I think one of the dangers with them is presenting stats, right? It's far more about the experience, the emotions of the process. So when I'm selling to a four, I'm going to be far more keen on expressing the emotion of why they're moving and why they're not moving, and using that as a motivator as opposed to more factual based stuff.
Okay,
so
love it. Five?
Yeah, fives are almost the complete opposite. Fives are completely in their mind. So they're called the investigators, and everything is about facts, right? They're usually cold, distant, separated. They hate pressure. So fives, like I'll use specific words when I'm selling to a five. Like I'll use like data-driven decisions, which they absolutely like. As much as a five could light up, they will light up when I say that, right? So fives are the type that are infinitely more going to ask you to send the information to them ahead of time before you actually meet with them. Because the idea of actually meeting with a person, a salesperson, is like terrifying. They don't want to meet with a salesperson. They'll typically do an absurd amount of research on you before you ever even meet with them. And so very, very data-driven, like some of the most data-driven. I have a theory that more FSBOs than not are fives. I mean, there are FSBOs that become a FSBO because they know a ton of agents and they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It's a little bit different. But the stereotypical FSBO that you're talking about, super data-driven, super like, I'm not talking to you, like very, very much exhibit a lot of five behavior. So sixes are your like fear-based number, if like the highest fear-based number that there is on the Enneagram. And so like they're wanting worst case scenario. So typically like they're going to be asking you a million questions on the listing presentation until they feel really comfortable. They're one of those types that are detail-oriented, almost anally detail-oriented until they feel that their fears have been resolved, and then they become incredibly social. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you deal with the six, because it's like they're not social until they are, and then they're very social. So the biggest thing you could do with the six is deal with their fears first. Like the whole like we'll address that later is really, really problematic for a six. But if you address their fear first, then it becomes very easy to sell to them. Mm-hmm. So sevens are usually the most fun, energetic, scattered people on the Enneagram. Oftentimes they end up in sales because they could fit nowhere else. They're the type that are extremely unlikely to follow up with anybody, and they'd rather call a cold stranger. Everybody's their friend, but don't ask them to actually they're going to flake on you more than any other number by a fair mile. So they're the types of friends you want to have when you're a kid, but you get burned by them often, right? Because they leave you for a more fun party. It's typically your seven.
Okay, so they're the social ones, right?
Yeah, enthusiast, we'll call them, yeah.
Enthusiast, all right. And how do we sell to the enthusiast?
Okay, so enthusiasts are really fun to sell to. So it's all about being fun, right? So you get there, you're like life of the party, like bring a beer with you when you go to, like just have a good time. Talk about the homecoming, the welcoming party you're going to throw for them after they buy the house or after they sell the house. And then you're usually to close a seven, you're going to use FOMO. Sevens hate missing out. And so the fear of missing out is a pretty big deal, right? So you connect with them on a personal level. They want to know that the process is going to be fun with you. Obviously they want to know that you're going to get good results, but it's more about the fun aspect usually. And then the fear of missing out on the next deal or with the markets, because they're a fear-based number. You just would never know it. So, and I can go into triads later if you want, and how those work, but yeah, basically they're a fear-based number. You would never know it. So present with fun and then use FOMO to close.
Okay. Awesome.
So, Eights are the challenger. So eights are going to be usually blunt and direct and sometimes intense, high energy people. Eights oftentimes are CEOs or heads of organizations. Threes are too, but they look a bit different. So with an eight, you absolutely want to be direct and confident. Like eights are kind of like the type of people that they like to test what people are made of. And so like they'll say stuff just to stir up people, just to see like how people like we kind of lust for intensity. And so when you're with an eight, just know that them like coming at you is not necessarily a bad thing. It's more just like, show me what you're made of. So you want to be as blunt and direct with them as possible. Like I presented to an eight on Sunday, and it was a listing presentation. It was she wanted 1.8 million. Property is going to sell for probably about 1.2 million, right? I knew for sure she was a 3 or an 8 because of how successful she's been in life and how extroverted she is, right? So I kind of did a couple small questions to figure out, was her main motivation like her own success, or was it a little bit more based on like concrete things? I determined in my mind that she was an 8. Obviously, sometimes we're wrong. And so literally I'm like, I got to tell you two straight. Your property with me is not selling more than 1.2 million. This is why, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, finally, someone who's telling me the truth, right? I've interviewed with 5 agents. Nobody would tell me this. So we're going to go sign the listing tomorrow, take all the photos. So like with an 8, the news can be really ugly, but they'll respect you for it.
Yep. Love that. Okay, good. And what's a 9?
So 9's a peacemaker. So 9, peace at all costs, is really a peacemaker.
Peacemaker?
Yep. So they're conflict avoidant, like both in a good way and a bad way, right? They just are going to avoid conflict at all costs. So they're trying to create peace both externally in their world and internally with themselves. So oftentimes, 9s are some of the nicest people to be around as well. They're not necessarily as driven to help people as 2s are, but it's all about having a peaceful world. So for 9s, the process has to be easy. If it's not extremely easy, then it's not something that they want to engage in, right? So oftentimes when I identify 9, and they're usually easy to identify because they're some of the most easygoing people in the world, you want to make the process that they're currently in seem more complex and challenging than where they're wanting to go, right? When it's easier to do the next step than to stay where they're at, then they'll oftentimes make the transition. But if there's any level of complexity to the process, it's not necessarily a desirable thing for them.
No, this
Okay.
is
Okay. So I got it. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I have a question in reference to this. So is there a way for someone to be a 9 and I don't know, another one, a 3? I'm
Okay. So I'm going to go as deep as you guys want me to go on.
Yeah.
Right?
Keep going.
We want to go deep.
Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially this is another reason I freaking love the Enneagram, right? Is that one, the Enneagram accounts for how you grow as a human being, right? So for example, when you are in health and you are trying to be a better version of yourself, you are going to take on the positive attributes of other numbers in a very specific sequence. And when you are stressed, you're going to take on negative characteristics. And those negative characteristics you can take on are of other numbers in a very specific sequence, depending on the number that you are. So as an example, 9s, they grow towards 3 and they stress towards 6. So in other words, when a 9 is in health and they're trying to become the best version of themselves, they'll actually take on the best attributes of the 3, which is the achiever, right? And when they're in stress, they'll take on the worst characteristics of the 6, which is the fear-based number, right? So in essence, as you grow as a person, you're going to take on positive traits. When you stress out or you go downwards in your development as a person, you're going to take on negative characteristics. And so the Enneagram accounts for the characteristics that you pick up and that you, in both directions as you grow and as you evolve.
I can see
So talk to us about, talk to us about an 8, because I think that in listings we do come across, when I hear you talk about an 8, it sounds more like a driver type of a personality. So talk to me about an 8 so that I can better understand whether it's a stress scenario or whether or not it's not. So same thing that you just did with a 9, do it with an 8.
Okay, so 8s grow towards 2. So I think one of the reasons that, every number when they're really healthy is beautiful, right? It looks a little different, but it's beautiful, right? So there's no bad number and there's no good numbers per se. There's healthy people and unhealthy people, right? But 8s, as an example, when they grow and when they take on healthy aspects, they grow to become a helper, right? So the 8s hard level of intensity and energy and passion and vision, which 8s usually have an abundance of vision, right? They take on the wonderful qualities of the 2. So when you see somebody that has got an immense amount of drive and intensity become one of the most generous helpers ever, it's oftentimes an 8 that's extremely healthy, right?
Got it. So that's what we see. Like when I'm listening to you, that's almost like you're describing myself, you know,
awesome.
and that drive fashion. But I mean, I think I'm healthy.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Where's Leonard? I'm gonna ask Leonard.
Yeah.
My husband will tell you that I'm healthy. He likes it. So, but in the sense of, you know, if you would have caught me, let's say when Michael talks about rewind the clock back 3 years ago, you know, I would not have been an 8 that also takes on a 2. Now in this current thriving state that I am in, I am an 8 that takes on a 2. So it gives me more to go and help people and do all that. But I'm so much a driver. I know that I am. So I get it.
Team leaders are, right? Yep.
Yeah. Well, once they get to, a lot of team leaders are drivers, but I think that it takes, once you hit a certain phase or a milestone in your business is where I can see that you do shift to taking on the 2s as you're describing it. This is good. Yeah. It's great.
So let me contrast some of the extroverted types that are oftentimes more likely to be team leaders than other numbers, right? So the 3 oftentimes is very likely to be a team leader, right? So a 3, when they grow, they take on the positive attributes of the 6. So the positive attributes of a 6 is that they're unbelievable planners, right? So a 3 that's leading a team oftentimes leads a different looking team than an 8 that leads a team, right? 3s are more risk averse. They're not completely averse to risk, but they're typically they like to be more profitable for longer. They're more willing to stay in specific lanes. 8s oftentimes like to be broader, take on more ventures, etc. So if in your health you become far more of a planner, you're probably a 3. If in your health you become far more of a helper and extremely generous, you're probably an 8, right? The downside of the 8 is the 5. So when 5s are in stress, which happens a lot with team leaders because you overextend yourself and, you know, it's just a lot of stuff you deal with as a team leader, you can go to 5 pretty quickly. So for me, when I'm in major stress, I become distant, cold, and calculated, right? So like if my wife and I have a disagreement and it impacts me, I just become cold to her for a few hours, a day, a week, right? And I'm married to a 2, so that coldness is not well received, but it's how I process. And I went through this pattern long before I identified it myself in the Enneagram, realizing, okay, there's actually a pattern to how I grow in stress, so I'm able to get rid of it quicker, and I'm able to help her understand. So it's been really good for not only my team, but for, you know, marriage and kids and et cetera. So.
Man, I think I was just on the couch.
I know, right?
Been laying on the couch today because it makes total sense, you know, and mine is probably a little bit different as to where I will pull away. If I get stressed, I back down. I tell Michael and Brian, I'm going dark. That's my term.
That's my hint to leave her the freak alone. Or I think yes. That's how I know. It's like, don't be bugging Cherie this week. Leave her alone.
Yes.
Michael sends me flowers when I go dark.
I show up with a big flag the next week. You know, I'm like, it's just me.
Smart man. Yep.
Yeah, but then it does, you know, and then I'll shift it, but I need time to kind of process it. And I can tell if I'm feeling stress, and I don't like shifting out of what you would consider the 5. You know, I don't like shifting out of that. So I don't like feeling the stress. So I will pull back so that I can wrap my head around it, and I'm not stressing other people out that are around me until I can jump back into that lane.
Well, and it's interesting too, I've been so thankful for this because I communicate this to my team, because before we would go through a stressful period for me in my personal life or in business, and I would just be gone from the office for 2 days, right? And that's not good for culture, right? When you got W-2 employees and team leaders that are like, where is Matt and what is he thinking and why is he gone for a day or 2, right? And for me, that was such a better solution than staying in the moment and being what happens with an 8 when they're caged in their stress, right? But the second I was able to communicate that to my team, this is how my body experiences problems and stress. They totally understand now, right? So
I think it's even great in teaching the team, you know, so like for me, yes, it helps with sales, but it also helps in us learning how to communicate with each other. So I've done the same thing, not in this form, but you know, when I talk to my team and I'll tell them this is how I am. So if you come to me with the whole back-ended story, I don't want to hear it.
Agreed.
Tell me what I need to fix, and that's it. You know, and then if I need more details, you can give it to me. But I think that this sounds as if this is something that works really well for them to understand how to communicate with each other, how to communicate with their spouses. And then they also can learn that communication when it comes down to their clients. Because it's, you know, we have so many different terms that we call this. And all of these kind of relate a little bit to me. So when I think of a DISC profile, when I think of, you know, using a NLP type of thing, when I think of mirroring and imaging, and now this, when I think of that, all of these type of different techniques do kind of merge together if you were to learn them all, which a lot of us do end up learning them all. Michael, I think you got something. I keep seeing you go.
Well, well, here's the thing. I've got some thoughts on this, but really what's hitting me hard is, first of all, I just wish everybody had a freaking sign around their neck that said, here's how you need to communicate with me. Make my life free. Like, why do I got to learn all this stuff? It's just so hard, right? And yet, I see the value in it. What I'm wondering is, like, have you ever done that? Have you ever said, okay, everybody in the team on your office door or your cubicle or whatever you got, we're going to have your DISC profile. Have your Enneagram score, you know, or whatever number put up there so that people know, and maybe even a couple of little notes. Here's how to communicate with me. You know, don't come to me with a great big sob story, or, you know, if I'm a, you know, whatever number, you know, don't come to me with, you know, the hard facts. You need to warm me up a little bit first, right? Be my friend, have a good time with me. Then we can talk about what needs to be done. Right. But, you know, it's like you get somebody like me, like Cherie and I are both, we're just kind of very, give me the facts, man. Come on. Like, I don't have time for this. Don't give me the whole thing. Like, I got 3 seconds and you've used 2 of them. So what do you got?
I'm not as bad as Hellickson.
but it can be bad. And so, you know, that said, tell me in real world application, the easiest way that we can start learning this and getting used to it and utilizing it in our business.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing is expectations, right? Most of the time we encounter problems in life when our expectations are wrong. So like, I wouldn't place a burden on your team to know this in 10 seconds, right? This is just an ongoing conversation. When we're talking about clients, the topic is always, what was their number, right? Basically, what I'm trying to ask them is, how much did you learn about the people you tried to sell to, right? In our team meetings, where we're talking about our sales and whatnot that we do on Tuesdays, it's like, it's a topic that is not like all the time, but it's like a little bit of almost every conversation when we talk about selling to someone or we talk about our team. So I think, like, if you look at this maybe as more like a year journey than a 1 week journey, I think it's a much better frame, right? And something that you said, Cherie, which I think was awesome, was like, you look at NLP and all these other things and they're all helpful. I agree, right? It's really, this is just another lens into humans, right? It's just, I'm trying to get the best tools into how can I, like you said, Mike, quickly understand people, but then also how can I deeply understand people?
And I like what you know, some people that's listening might think it's a little bit cheesy, but I actually like the fact of taking it and sticking it somewhere, you know, if that team member has the same seat each time, to where it says it, or even our admins, you know, it's as to what that number is, because I think that what always helps with us is that repetitive that we're seeing it. So even if I walked past and I saw it sitting on someone's desk or at the, you know, where their cube is, it's going to constantly make me think this person is this, and this, you know, and it helps me. It's going to help me once I go out. I think one of the hardest things with sales is learning how to communicate with your client and speaking your client's language. So this is another avenue. And what I do like is it reminds me a little bit of the natural and the adaptive states and how different people, work and what's the best way to communicate. This is like another layer to that. And I do like that. I like that it's breaking it down even further. But agents have such a fear that of going through the door, I've never met you, I shake your hand. I mean, I'm going to walk around the house and what am I going to do? And how do I learn how to speak that client's language? Because for me, and you're right, it took it took me a few years to really dive deep into a DISC profile that now when I meet someone, like I can almost tell just by what you're wearing, what you are. And just a few seconds of you talking, I can flip it into speaking your language just because I've been working on this over the course of the year. So now it's not a magic pill type of thing. None of them are, but it takes some time. I know Brian is extremely good when it comes down to NLPs. I'm not. Brian is.
That's awesome.
But he's learned it. It takes a long time, and this takes years in order for you to perfect, but you got to start. That's the biggest thing, is that you got to start somewhere. So for team leaders that are on here, or even those who are, you just have an admin that's there, for me, I almost want to go walk and put a 9 in the middle of Leonard's forehead. So when I see him, I'm like, here comes my 9.
Yeah.
That's my husband. Sorry.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So female 8s oftentimes marry male 9s.
See?
Oftentimes, like far more often than not. So your husband's a peacemaker?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Big time. So, okay, cool.
That's awesome. And there's that's cultural too. There's certain cultures that I think you'll see more predominant, and when I say cultures, I'm not talking about like other countries, although that too. I'm just talking about even in the United States. I would guess that there are regions within the United States where you've got predominantly, certain personality types. Here's the thing that I'm coming away with this with though, and Brian really touched on it earlier. And Sri, you've kind of been talking about it a little bit too. It's not a magic pill. It's not, okay, hey, we're going to teach you this, you're going to learn it, and all of a sudden you're going to implement it. It really comes down to, first of all, an overall awareness. And it's really about, am I taking the time to understand who I'm selling to, or am I just, a bull in a china shop and I'm just bowling over everybody, hoping that I get something out of it? And by the way, Mariah says, thank you for always bringing us valuable training here. And by the way, yes, Mariah, appreciate you being here. And seriously, it's because of you guys that we're able to do this. But that being said, I think, first of all, we and our teams need to get an overall awareness. And what I like that you're doing, Matt, it sounds like you're doing a daily huddle. Is that right or not?
We're doing weekly team meetings, but some small form of a daily huddle.
Dude, I would tell you this, if I were doing a daily huddle, which I recommend for everybody, on my daily huddle, this would be a great tool on your daily huddle to just consistently ask people, what were they? Were they a 1, a 5, an 8, a 9, or whatever? I think the DISC profile is also a great tool and can be used in a similar way. But this does sound like it kind of gets a little bit more specific and gives you the tool on, okay, specifically, this is how you handle them. I like that. Brian, we may need to work this into our NLP and body language course. We may need to find a way to get the Enneagram and the DISC kind of blended in there. Maybe do a couple of chapters on those and just break it down, make it really simple. Okay, here's how you identify the types. Here's how you sell to each type.
And let me take a step back, because I think it's real important. So I can tell you right now, I'm either an 8 or a 3. I learned that from the last 49 minutes of listening to this conversation.
Yeah.
So, all that being said, though, here's the thing that I don't know that we've mentioned. Matt's an expert at this. And if you're a team leader who's listening to this call, do not go and train your team on this. You don't know how. You have no idea what you're talking about. And I'll be honest, it's interesting. So I'm a numbers guy for people who know me. I'll tell you one of the things that I dislike about this, and I think that maybe there seems to be names as it goes along. One of the things I think people need to be careful of, I can tell you right now, if you tell my wife, who hates numbers, like, it's not an exaggeration, she couldn't remember the street address she could remember that we lived at 5805. It was too many numbers. Now, she's brilliant when it comes to a lot of other things. So associating a person with a number is just going to make her head go. So it's one of those things to understand that there's different ways that people. So maybe for that type of person, it's maybe you call a threesome, and because you had names in there. Mm-hmm. Thing that I've noticed, and by the way, I appreciate you have a level of mastery on this that I'm going to guess if I studied it would take me at least 6 months to a year to get to your level of mastery. Because you're talking about, in this situation, an 8 becomes a 3, and this situation, a 4 becomes a 5. And I'll be honest, I haven't tracked it all. But my point is, if you're going to teach this, you need to become at least on some level a master. If you're an agent out there who's single going, I love what Matt's going and I love that he identifies with it, you need to go out and study this yourself. And by the way, I'm going to guess, and I'm not taking a course on this, but probably the first time to practice this is not on a listing appointment. It's not
correct
for the first time. This is stuff you need to practice with your friends and your family, and don't put yourself in a weird situation. But my point is that an amazing process, it sounds like, but it's not something that you're just going to go in 15 minutes. And honestly, great processes you never learn in 15 minutes. So great content. I just want everyone to understand that you're probably not going to become an Enneagram expert here in the next, we've got 9 minutes left.
Yeah. I think if you can't break down the disc and you don't necessarily understand that, and that's pretty easy to me, at least it is, then this is a whole nother level outside of that. But go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is more complex than the disc, and that's why I love it, right? Because it gives more insights, right? And to your point, Brian, I think you made some phenomenal points there. I think the best place to start with this is on yourself. Like, I think if you figure out what your number is and go crazy deep on what that means, then you're going to realize how you show up to the world and what sort of positives and negatives that you bring to people. It's pretty crazy how much good we can bring to people and how much, of ourselves that people don't want we can bring. I mean, especially for us that are 3s and 8s. 8s, even in particular, we can be really intense people, oftentimes naturally less aware of other people's feelings. We can cause some real trouble. And I think the more we become aware of that, the better we can be to people.
So here's the thing. I like this topic. I think it's something I'd like to learn more about. Obviously, I'm brand new to this. This is my first exposure to the Enneagram. I couldn't even pronounce it at the beginning of the call. Now I feel like at least I've learned that. Woohoo! All right, there's step 1. So that being said, I can see a lot of places that this could be beneficial in our businesses. Essentially, what I'm really thinking is that you could learn to really build a listing presentation that kind of answers, and I'm partial to the listing side because that's what I loved was the listing side. But I'm thinking about, you could really dial in a listing presentation that would answer or sell to most of these types at some point in the presentation. And then if you get to a point toward the end of the conversation where you're like, oh my gosh, this person's such and such, I need to kind of shift. Maybe we could make that a little bit easier for somebody. That's not going to happen again on this call. But what I would like to do is know, and there's a download, right? So if you guys go to clubwealth.com/Matt Cavanaugh, clubwealth.com/Matt Cavanaugh. We've pinned the comment in the Facebook group here, on the Michael Hillickson's Club Wealth Real Estate Coaching and Consulting page. That being said, I can get that download, but where else can I also go? What other resources are there out there if I really want to go deep on the Enneagram?
Yeah, so at first what I would do is tell people to go take the test, right?
Where do I do that?
What's that?
Where do I do that?
You can Google Enneagram test free online, and there's some free tests that will come up. I think in the download, I think there's a link to it as well.
Okay, perfect.
What I realized is taking the test requires you to have a certain level of self-awareness. So for a lot of people, they come out with the right result, but some people who are less self-aware may not, right? So my recommendation for a lot of people is to read one of 2 books. Either read the book, The Road Back to You, starting in the 3rd chapter, or read the book Personality Types by Don Rizzo. And what that will do, the Personality Types is a deeper book. It's a little bit more dry, but it's not completely dry, but it's far more in depth. The Road Back to You is a little bit of a lighter read, and it'll give you 20 points at the beginning of each number. And if you identify with like 15 or 16 or more of those, it's likely that you're that number. And so that's probably a better way to read through the numbers and discover, and then once you found your number, then you can go deep on it. So I would say starting by reading those audiobooks is probably the best way.
It was The Road Back to You. And what was the second one?
Personality Types by Don Rizzo. And I think those are included. If not, I'll send them out to you so that they can be included.
Perfect. All right. Good stuff. All right. We're running out of time. We've got to get to our coaches call here. So in the last couple of minutes here, I'd like to get final takeaways. Let's start with Brian and Sheree, and then Matt, and then I'll wrap us up. So let's go to Brian first, then Sheree.
So my takeaway is I'm going to reiterate something that Matt said. Find out about yourself. Because if you never understand this about anybody else, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, step 1 is me. Because a lot of this is to understand, if I'm an 8, how am I coming across to people? In what ways can I understand? I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't know the math at all, but I'm going to guess your 8s and 3s are maybe 20% of the population. And if you're in that 20% of that population, do you really understand how you're coming across to other people? Because sometimes we don't understand. Sometimes we're like, I don't get it. I told them what to do and how to do it and where to do it and when to do it, and they didn't do it. Well, of course not, because you didn't communicate with them in a way that resonated with them. And that's what this is all about. It's a different model to figure out the best way for you to communicate with others. And we can never stop learning that. So again, thanks for being on today, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I like what you said, because for me, there's this whole journey that I've been on lately where I've already been through it, but I'm really deep when it comes down to people understanding themselves. So I really like what you just said, Brian, because I think that once you know yourself, then you also can then learn how you communicate with other people. And just like Brian said, how the world sees you and how the world is viewing you. But it takes a lot of self-awareness in order for you to do that. One of the points that you did say, I want to reiterate, is that this is something that you have to learn. This isn't something that is new that you're going to get in this hour-long episode that we're doing here. You're going to be able to go out and teach it, or even go out. You can start to implement it, but let's just take small steps here in your growth and learning process. Whether you are a team leader, learn it first before you attempt to teach it. Whether you're individual, start learning it within yourself before you attempt to teach it to someone else. But thanks, Matt. And it's Cavanaugh with a C.
Yeah.
So guys, when you look it up for Club Wealth, make sure you're spelling Cavanaugh with a C.
Thank you very much for that. All right, Matt, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think Brian and Sheree, what you said, I mean, for me, it was a journey where I started with myself, and it was just so enlightening. And the benefits of just understanding myself at a deeper level was so beneficial just in terms of, my overall disposition. So I think, starting there, and then, maybe then moving to the people that are most close to you, spouse, that type of thing. And then in a more safe environment. And then, maybe gradually moving it to your team and then on to sales. So,
and I'll say this really quick, Michael. I think starting with yourself helps you understand what your superpower is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think will also help with that. But go ahead, Alexon.
Yeah, no, what I was going to suggest is, and Matt, I don't know if you're open to this or not. I don't mean to put you on the spot in front of thousands of people, but I'm going to. So
I love it. Yeah.
Well, we do a big event twice a year. We've got our Business Strategy Mastermind Conference in November, which Tara, maybe you could type the links in, or anybody else. But it's clubwealth.com/BSM is our next upcoming event. That's this November, and then we've got our Listing Agent Bootcamp in the spring. But I'm just kind of wondering if I think there might be some people out there, and maybe you guys that are watching, if you want to type this in, would you be interested in hearing Matt teach a class at Business Strategy Mastermind Conference? And Matt, would you even be open to it? It's in Anaheim in November. And is that something you'd even entertain, is maybe coming out and teaching a class on the Enneagram and how we can use it in our businesses?
I would absolutely love to.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I was a former teacher, so there's nothing more satisfying me than helping people and teaching stuff. So,
well, I think this is a deep enough topic, and I think there's enough people that would appreciate a great class on it. And so maybe we can have you reach out to, or actually, I'll have the team reach out. Dana Faircloth is typing in BSM. Look at all these guys; they're all typing in BSM now. I'm seeing that looks like there's some interest. If you guys want to have him do this, type in, come speak at BSM or something like that. Type that in your screen, and we'll see if we can't put enough peer pressure on Matt to get him to come out and give us a great class on it. So,
I think he already said yes, but okay.
Well, but you got to keep the peer pressure up to make sure that the yes stays yes, because I'm that. What's
yes,
that?
We need 100 yeses, otherwise it's out. Yeah.
I don't know what number that, but maybe I'm a 10, right? Instead, maybe I'm the gonna drive so hard that I just drive you nuts.
There you go.
Well.
Yeah, exactly. Brian, don't even say it, Brian and Sheree. I know exactly what you're going to say. All right. That being said, I really appreciate you being on, Matt. Brian and Sheree, as always, appreciate you guys being our co-hosts. And seriously, you guys jump on clubwealth.com/Matt Cavanaugh. Get his free download. Take a look at it. Let's learn a little bit more about the Enneagram. And Jeff Moore says, Matt Cavanaugh is awesome. Thanks for your wisdom, man. So I take it you guys must know each other. Jeff's one of our coaches here at Club Wealth, great guy. And so that being said, we got to jump on our coach's call. Also, please remember to check out our sponsor, Wise Hire, clubwealth.com/Wise Hire. We love those guys. They do great stuff, and it's cheap. Like, seriously, the ROI on that thing is awesome. So that being said, have an awesome day. And remember, inside each one of you, there's a world-class beast just dying to get out. You got to choose to unleash that beast. So go do something, anything at a world-class level today. Take care.